Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. We are about 1 week out from the elections now, the midterm 2018 elections in the United States, and I would just like to give my opinion on what I think is going to happen based on various information and sources. And we're going to be using two maps. This one here is just a regular generic map of the Senate. I'm going to be covering the Senate. I'm not going to get into the House of Representatives. And this is a map of Trump's net approval rating in all 50 states. And as you can see, the turquoise color being more for Trump, the darker that is. And then, of course, the darker the orange, the more anti-Trump. So the first area or region that I'd like to concentrate on would be the Northeast. And this is kind of like a no-brainer for just about everyone. The Democrats are very strong in the Northeast. If you look at the Trump approval ratings, very anti-Trump. So these areas I'm probably going to give to the Democrats. And you have to excuse me, my map on Real Clear Politics likes to change all the time. But there's also, there's some other things that are going on here. It's not just a referendum on Trump. As you see, for example, in West Virginia, which has a 29% approval rating for Trump, or I shouldn't say percent, but a 29 net approval rating, while the Democrat Joe Manchin is at 47.7, is resoundingly beating out his Republican challenger. So it's not. There's also a lot of local elections, and it's not only just about Trump. So in addition to the Northeast, which I'm going to hand over solidly to the Democrats, I want to look at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And these three states, Trump just barely won. And in an election cycle where the Republicans did very well, the fact that he was just barely able to carry these states means that in an off-season election, or I should say midterm election, where the party that's not in charge usually does really well, it's going to be very hard for Republicans to win these seats. So I'm going to give these seats with Baldwin, Stabenow, and Casey to the Democrats. Trump won resounding in Ohio, but Brown is very popular in the state, especially with unions in the north and in the east, where there's a large population, also Ohio and Cincinnati. The Republican candidate may get more of the west and south, which is more rural. And Ohio is kind of like a microcosm of the United States in that sense, the northeast, the southeast, the west, and the northwest. But I would probably hand it over to Brown. And another interesting thing to note about Ohio is that Trump won by a significant margin. I don't think it was double digits, but it was quite large. And the fact that he's behind -3 shows that the Democrats, the governor race is neck and neck here, and it's probably a no-brainer for the Democrats. Joe Manchin is not like a typical Democrat that you might find of the type that exists in, say, New York or California. He's more of an old-style conservative Democrat. And when the Kavanaugh debacle was going on, he actually came out and said, "I'm sorry, I'm just a West Virginian." And I think a lot of people in West Virginia know that, and that's why they will vote for him again. Although we know, if you've lived through 2016, you know that anything can happen. So, but I'm going to say that West Virginia is going to go for Democrat. An interesting situation is developing out in New Jersey. Menendez is not very popular. He has some corruption scandals going on there, and a lot of people are not a real big fan of him. But in the end, it's the Northeast, mostly liberal, and a lot of people are probably going to hold their nose and pull the plug for Menendez. So I imagine him probably winning that. It could be closer than even this, but I think a lot of people will pull through for Menendez. And of course, Minnesota on all sides. So that covers that. That gives the Democrats 44. Now it gets much more difficult. I think that there's a demographic change that's going on here in the United States based on trends that people have left the Rust Belt. A lot of progressives and Democrats have left the Rust Belt and moved out to the Southwest. In addition to the migration from within the country moving to the South and the West, you also have migration from Central America and other areas moving into these regions. And I think that, Trump lost Nevada in the last election when Republicans did very well, and the state has been moving more and more blue. And if you look at the approval rating, he's down by 7 points, down by 3 in Arizona. In a state that traditionally votes Republican, if the president party is down by that much, it symbols a likelihood, in addition to the migration, and it could be enough to pull Arizona to the Democrats. So I'm going to say, based on that the South and the West is turning more Democrat. And that is why Texas is likely GOP, but not solid GOP. There are a lot of conservative elements in the state, but a lot of people, a lot of progressives from around the country have moved into the suburbs of Austin and Dallas, and there's been a lot of migration from the South, and it's been slowly making it more and more Democrat. And Beto's run a very strong grassroots campaign. A lot of people have gotten out and voted for him. Ted Cruz isn't as popular as he once was. A lot of Republicans will hold their nose and pull the lever for him as well. But they remember that Trump called Ted Lion Ted. And in fact, Beto, he reiterated that during a campaign rally and a debate, basically saying that's why we call you Lion Ted. So there's that, but there's also a lot of conservative elements in the state. So Texas is going to be the unique scenario. I want to say that something could happen in Texas in a week, and I'm going to say that it's a very good possibility. However, just to be safe, I'm going to leave it as a toss-up because the Republicans. This is a Republican state. It's going to be very difficult for him to win. He's really going to have to get the vote out. He's going to have to get people that are progressive, that are born outside of the state. What's left of the Democrats that are still in Texas, he's going to have to get that Latino vote out, and he's going to have to really push hard, and he's really going to have to encourage cynicism amongst Republicans in order to take that state. But I'm going to leave that as a toss-up. Montana, very much like West Virginia, has and there the map goes again. You have to excuse the map. It likes to do its own things. Montana, Trump won by large margins here. But when you go back to this map, his net approval is only 6. And in a state where Tester is a moderate Democrat fighting Rosendale, who has some baggage, I would say that the Democrats are probably going to win there. That's a case of Montana and West Virginia are cases where you have those kind of traditional conservative Democrats. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this map in. And what's interesting about North Dakota, once again, solid margins. But he only has an 8 net approval rating. But Heidi Heitkamp barely won this state. And it's going to be very difficult, especially with Kramer. He was able to come out and he actually won the state in their only representative district. And Heidi's popular. And there is, it's closer to Canada. It's got some progressive elements over here in the east side of the state. It's got the Native American vote. There are a lot of people that like her. But it's a deep red state. And we'll see what the Trump effect does. I'm going to go ahead and give it to, just to be safe, I'm just going to say North Dakota is probably going to go toward Republicans. Missouri and Indiana are facing a kind of problem that is the opposite of what they have out in the West. Whereas people are not coming in, they're going out, and they're leaving these areas and they're going to these areas for jobs and opportunities. And just the migration trends that way. So a lot of progressives have left these states, Indiana and Missouri, and have moved out. And so that leaves more Republican elements, more rural elements. And the races are close. McCaskill's made her case for fighting the opioid epidemic and also for the Affordable Care Act. But Trump remains popular. And if I can go back, he's got a 6 approval rating. He's got a 4% or 4 approval rating in Indiana. So it's going to be close. I'm going to say Republican just based on the political climate. That's probably how it's going to end up. Tennessee, overwhelmingly for Trump. Bettison has won the state before, overall, as a conservative Democrat. But with Trump showing up and campaigning for Blackburn and his popularity, I'm probably going to give that to the Republicans. And, of course, obviously, Mississippi, solid Republican. Florida, I think, could be a toss-up, but I'm going to hand it over to the Democrats just because of how the state has benefited from the Affordable Care Act. There's a lot of retirees there. There's a lot of Puerto Ricans that have come in. They're not a big fan of Trump, whether or not they'll actually vote. And there are a lot of, it's just always been a very close state, and we'll have to see. Trump's approval rating there is, you can't even see it. It's almost in the negative now. Florida, you always like to be right on the margins there. So anything could happen. I'm going to change this toss up. This is my final prediction. Quite possibly a 1-seat pickup. But it makes Mitch McConnell's life, I think to quote, I don't know who I was quoting there, but it makes it harder for John King. Yes, John King on CNN said Mitch McConnell's life is a lot harder when you're sitting at 51 seats and the Democrats have the House as opposed to 54, 55. If the Trump popularity remains strong and they can keep, let's say, Arizona and Nevada and Florida and maybe even pick up Montana, that would make that would be a huge difference. They'd be able to get a lot more things through. But also, we're dealing with the Trump factor. And too much has been said and too much has been done, and it's scared a lot of people, and a lot of people are unnerved about the division in the country, and it could be enough for people to say, okay, that's enough. Trump's done too much in terms of dividing people, and we need to bring people together. But there's also a lot of people out there, a lot of conservatives especially, that believe that the economy's growth is based on Trump, and that his we have to thank Trump for the economic boom, and they're really going to stand there and say, look what he's done with the country, the lowest unemployment, blah, 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 and they're going to support him for that reason, as well as the populism and the divisiveness. You either one or the other. And this is my final prediction, I would have to say, although I could see, depending if it's a blue wave, maybe Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota. If it's a blue tsunami, look out. These 3 states could also go, and Texas. And so there is a path for the Democrats to take the Senate. It's a possibility. It's just very tough when you're defending so many areas. And the Trump factor is going to play, but not in every case. West Virginia, Montana, I really think those areas are going to remain Democrat. So this is my final, I'm going to have to say my final map, exactly 1 week before the elections. And you'll have to look at just basically, like I said, population trends, Rust Belt. A lot of the popularity that Trump had in the Rust Belt has eroded because a lot of the things haven't really pulled through like was promised. The border wall hasn't really been built. And it's just, he put a lot of Republicans back in that were in when Bush was in. So, it's that's how it's turned out. So we'll see what happens. Thanks everyone for turning in and listening to me talk. And you all will see on election night.